and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
Strong words after Nick Reiner appeared in court today, charged with killing his parents, film legend Rob Reiner and Nick's mom, Michele. Law&Crime was in the courtroom, and we got our first look at Nick Reiner since his arrest last month. The bombshell development that happened in the courtroom that could change the trajectory of Nick's defense. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Well, a stunning twist in the Nick Reiner murder case unfolded in court today in Los Angeles, and it happened fast. The 32-year-old is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the brutal killings of his parents. Acclaimed director, just a legend in Hollywood, Rob Reiner, and his mom, photographer, producer, Michele Reiner. Both of them found dead inside their Brentwood home in Los Angeles on December 14th. Now, prosecutors say the couple suffered multiple stab wounds, and the charges come with special circumstances for multiple murders, meaning if he's convicted, Nick Reiner could face life without parole or even the death penalty. Both of those outcomes are on the table. But today's hearing wasn't about gruesome details or a plea, because before Reiner even entered a plea, his defense team cracked. High-profile attorney Alan Jackson, the guy standing beside him in those first appearances, went into the judge's chambers and then came back out and announced that he was withdrawing from the case. And just like that, Reiner was handed off to a public defender and the arraignment was delayed. This is after Reiner waived his right to be arraigned today. And then came this stunning moment. Outside court, Jackson stepped to the microphones and delivered a statement that was equal parts dramatic and deliberate. A line that immediately raises questions about where this defense is headed.
And you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
So here's the short version of how we landed in that courtroom today. Reiner was arrested in the hours after he allegedly stabbed both of his parents, director Rob Reiner and producer-photographer Michele Reiner, his own mom. He allegedly stabbed them multiple times inside the home they had lived in for decades in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles in December. Now, the next day, the district attorney of Los Angeles dropped the hammer. 2 counts of first-degree murder plus a special circumstance allegation for multiple murders, a charge that puts life without parole or even the death penalty on the table. Now, at this point, we don't know of a motive. There's been no motive that has been publicly stated at this point, no explanation for what prosecutors believe happened inside that house. We don't know the why. Nick also has been held without bail ever since. And in the days that followed, one thing really stood out immediately. It's his choice of lawyer, or at this point was his choice of lawyer, because Alan Jackson, a high-profile defense attorney, one of the biggest names in legal defense, appeared in court on Nick's behalf, really signaled that this case was going to be fought hard. But Nick never entered a plea. His arraignment was delayed once already, with Jackson telling the court that his client hadn't been medically cleared. Well, before we get to the big update that happened in court today, I think it's important to talk about the concerns that people reportedly had for Nick Reiner when it came to his years of addiction issues, as well as concerns about his mental health. So in the week after Nick's arrest, there have been plenty of stories about his bizarre behavior the night before Rob and Michele Reiner were found stabbed to death inside their home in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles, a mansion where they had lived for decades. The Hollywood Reporter put out a very detailed story about the holiday party at Conan O'Brien's house. The comedian, the late-night talk show host, a party that had a ton of A-list celebrities there. So the Hollywood Reporter talked about Nick going up to people at Conan's holiday party, allegedly demanding to know who they were and if they were famous. Apparently in this confrontation with Bill Hader that made the article, Nick was staring at him, and Bill Hader was politely trying to get out of this very awkward and concerning conversation that he was pulled into. It frankly sounds like it was more of a confrontation. Bill Hader tells Nick that he's just talking with somebody else, and then Nick just stares at him for a long period of time, according to this article in The Hollywood Reporter. Now, Nick has battled his demons. There's no doubt about that. And when it comes to issues of addiction, he's been open about the battles that he has fought since he was very young, at least as far back as when he was a teenager, because he went on podcasts and he talked about how he has been to rehab dozens of times, that he was even homeless in multiple states throughout his teenage years and perhaps into his early 20s. He ended up writing a movie called Being Charlie. It came out in 2016, 2015, 2016, and it was loosely based on his life. It was about a guy who struggled with heroin addiction and with being homeless. And the film was directed by one of the most high-profile directors of all time, the director behind When Harry Met Sally, the director behind A Few Good Men, his dad, Rob Reiner. Now, when you look at this movie, and it doesn't have the best reviews on IMDb, if I'm being honest, it could be seen that this film that Rob directed, after directing some of the biggest movies of all time, this was really more of an effort potentially to connect with his son, who had struggled so much. Maybe more than a way for him to make another Hollywood classic.
If your kid is going through rough times, you know, the parent your main job is to keep your child safe.
Now, that is Rob and Nick appearing together doing press for Being Charlie roughly a decade ago. This is a clip from AOL's Build series. It has since gone viral on YouTube. It's still publicly available on YouTube. And Nick and Rob, during their press appearances, would talk about doing this movie together and what it meant to their relationship. It seems like it was something really important to them that they were able to work on this together. Now, after this film came out, it didn't appear that Nick had much of a career in acting or writing or directing. But there is also reporting out there, not only about Nick's struggles with addiction, but recently Nick reportedly was diagnosed with a very serious mental health condition. TMZ reported after Rob and Michele Reiner were found dead that Nick had been diagnosed with schizophrenia in the weeks before his parents were murdered. TMZ said that it spoke with someone who had direct knowledge of how Nick was doing in jail after he was arrested for allegedly killing his parents. The story said that Nick was in a fog because of his medical condition and the meds that he has been on. And that report said that Nick, at this point, was not reeling in grief. And that was based off of what this article said was Nick's mental health state at the time. Now, after the alleged murders of his parents, Nick reportedly went to a hotel in Santa Monica, which is about 4 miles from his parents' house in Brentwood, and he allegedly checked into a hotel around 4 in the morning, according to media reports, and the next day, just a terrifying scene played out because the room was allegedly covered in blood. This is when the staff went in to turn the room over the next day. In another big TMZ report, though, and we'll have to watch this, police perhaps searched that room without a warrant, and that could raise questions about whether what they found in that room, whether that would be admissible in court, but I think we're a long way away from that point in this story. Now, Nick was arrested by police in LA around 9:30 in the evening, the day of when his parents' bodies were discovered. Those bodies found around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And Nick was found near the campus of the University of Southern California, more in downtown LA. He was roughly 15 miles from his parents' home. NBC Los Angeles was the first media outlet to obtain video showing Nick buying what appears to be a sports drink at a convenience store, then walking across the street where you can see police pull up and take him into custody. And Nick has been in custody ever since, and he is going to continue to be in custody even after his court appearance today, as we continue to wait for him to be arraigned and we continue to wait for him to enter a plea to these very serious charges that he's facing, that he allegedly killed his mom and his dad. Now, whether he allegedly killed his parents because of issues of addiction, or if there's a motive that we're unaware of, or whether it was the result of a very serious mental health condition, that is something that is going to be very important to watch as this case continues to move forward through the legal system in Southern California. Now, that set the stage for today in Los Angeles. Nick Reiner was brought into court again, this time expected to be finally arraigned. But before that could happen, everything shifted. Jackson asked to speak with the judge in chambers. Then minutes later, he returned to the courtroom, and this is how it happened.
I, on behalf of Watson Jackson and Quinn, and with Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, would ask to withdraw as counsel of record based on the conversation that we've had in chambers and the explanation we've provided to the court in chambers. We feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw as counsel and ask to be relieved. The Public Defender's Office has been notified. We've had conversations with them. They're here, they're staffed, they're ready to take over. My understanding is they're ready for the appointment immediately, forthwith.
Good morning, Your Honor. Kimberly Green from the Public Defender's Office. That is correct.
So the court will case, and so that firm is relieved as counsel of record, and the court appoints the Public Defender's Office to represent Mr. Reiner.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Current counsel turn over any items that they've received.
We will absolutely comply with that. We've already begun. The issue has been met.
Your Honor, there is a protective order issued by the court in place regarding the handling of discovery, order that's remained in place for now, and we will serve a copy of that on the Public Defender's Office along with the discovery we provide.
Yes, the court will order that order.
Preclude me from Mr. Bailey raises a very sage point. I'm under a protective order not to provide our discovery to anybody else. That would text providing the information only to Ms. Green in her office. Then I can be in full compliance with the protective order.
Anything to people in response to that request?
No problem. I believe the protective order spells out that it covers Mr. Jackson's firm as well as any successor counsel.
Thank you.
So you can provide everything to Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Back on the record in People versus Nick Reiner, case number 25 CJC F08098.
Good morning. Kimberly Green here at the Public Defender's Office on behalf of Mr. Reiner, who is present.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. Habib Bailey, representing the people of the state of California.
Thank you.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd ask to put over the arraignment one last time to February 23rd. That date is
That date is fine.
Thank you, and I will work with Ms. Green to get her discovery prior to that date.
I'll take a waiver for you. Entitled, you have a constitutional statutory right to a speedy arraignment. Your counsel, Ms. Green from the Public Defender's Office, is requesting that your arraignment be continued to February the 23rd, 2026. In this department, do you waive your right to be arraigned today so that your matter may be continued to February 23rd, 2026 for arraignment?
Yeah, I agree with
Thank you. Does counsel join that waiver?
I do, Your
The
Honor.
court finds that the defendant has made a knowing and intelligent waiver of his right to a speedy arraignment, and that his counsel of record joins in that waiver. Matter set for arraignment in this department, February 23rd, 2026. Bail remains at no bail. You confirm?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And while all of that was unfolding inside the courtroom, there were things that you wouldn't catch just by listening to the feed. Because here at Law&Crime, we had a member of our team actually there on the ground. And they tell us that Nick Reiner didn't appear surprised by what was happening. Before the hearing even started, he was actually seen chatting and laughing with deputies. His head was shaved. He had a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. He was frankly looking worn down, but not visibly shaken. His brother and sister were not in the gallery today. Alan Jackson, meanwhile, he was pacing, crossing his arms. He was on his phone. He clearly tense from what our person in the courtroom could see. Now, even before he asked to speak with the judge, he just seemed to be very tense in this moment. Now, once the hearing wrapped, Jackson did not leave quietly. He walked straight out of the courtroom, past the cameras, and stepped up to the microphones. And that's where this case took yet another turn. Once outside the courthouse, Alan Jackson, he didn't dodge cameras. He stepped up right to the microphones, and before anyone could even ask a question, he made one thing clear. This wasn't a strategic exit, he says. It wasn't something that he wanted.
I had to withdraw as Nick Reiner's counsel circumstances beyond our control, but more importantly, circumstances beyond Nick's control, have dictated that, sadly, it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick. I'm legally and I'm ethically prohibited from explaining all the reasons why. I know that's a question on everybody's mind. We expect the public defender to step in. They've already been appointed and very capably protect Nick Reiner's interests as he moves forward through the system. But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests. In fact, we know, we're not just convinced, we know that the legal process will reveal the true facts of the circumstances surrounding this case, Nick's case. You know, a lot's been printed of late, over the last 3 weeks. A lot has been printed. Printed about Nick, printed about his family, printed about the circumstances. Speculation is in print. On December 15th, in the early morning hours, I was in New York at the time, and I got a call. Me and my team, we dropped everything. And for the last 3 weeks, we have devoted literally every waking hour to protecting Nick and his interests. We've investigated this matter top to bottom, back to front. What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
I want you to think about that line real quick. Quote, not guilty of murder. Jackson did not say Nick Reiner didn't kill his parents. He didn't say Nick Reiner is innocent. He said, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. And that distinction matters. Under California law, a person can commit an act, even a deadly one, and still not be legally guilty of murder if prosecutors can't prove the required mental state, intent, malice, or capacity. Now, that can open the door to defenses involving insanity, mental incapacity, or a lack of criminal intent, though it is important to say that Jackson did not specify which, if any, of those defenses might apply here. What he did say is that his team investigated this case, quote, top to bottom, and walked away believing that the law itself changes how this case should be viewed. Now, the Los Angeles County District Attorney, he stepped right up to the podium himself, and he made it clear that the DA's office is not backing down.
In our criminal justice system, every defendant is entitled to a lawyer who will zealously represent their interests and do so effectively. So too is Nick Reiner, whether it's Alan Jackson, someone from the public defender's office, or any lawyer. He's entitled to that lawyer, and we'll make sure he gets that lawyer. Second point, in the process of dealing with that lawyer, we will make sure, the DA's office will make sure, that that lawyer is provided with full discovery of all the facts that pertain to this particular situation, whether it's interviews, whether it's any type of video, whether it's any type of expert reports. We'll make sure that that lawyer gets the facts necessary to effectively represent their client in a court of law. And third point, we are fully confident that a jury will convict Nick Reiner beyond a reasonable doubt of the brutal murders of his parents, Rob Reiner and Michele Singer Reiner, and do so unanimously. Thank you very much.
So that is where things now stand. Nick Reiner remains in custody, held without bail, and he is now represented by a public defender, not the high-profile and likely very expensive criminal defense attorney Alan Jackson, who you may remember, of course, from the Karen Reed trial, where he was able to get a not guilty. This expected to be a very high-profile defense, but he is not going to be by Nick Reiner's side. As for Nick Reiner's arraignment, where he is expected to finally enter a plea, that has been pushed back to February 23rd, 2026. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can also now find On the Case on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.